Lessons from the sector's most successful movement, Giving Tuesday. So for me personally, this is a full circle moment. I have worked on our Giving Tuesday campaign efforts for the past 3 years. So I'm personally really excited that we have the opportunity to be joined by a fantastic panel of women today and to be digging into some of the trends around giving on Giving Tuesday and then strategies that you all can take back to your organizations and hopefully find success this year on Giving Tuesday. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. Our moderator, her name is Asha Curran, and she is the Chief Innovation Officer at 92nd Street Y, and she is also one of the co-founders of Giving Tuesday. We're also joined by Sherry Lunn. She is the Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Engagement at the Trevor Project. And a fun fact for you guys, they were our second top fundraiser on Giving Tuesday last year on the Classy platform. We're also joined by Kristen O'Leary Jones. She is the Development Director at Camp Kesem, and Camp Kesem actually raised $1.25 million on Giving Tuesday last year. And last but not least, we are joined by Sydney Rose. She is the Strategic Partnerships and Programs Manager at Datakind, and they've been working with the Giving Tuesday team to aggregate some data around Giving Tuesday and then hopefully use that in the future to make some future predictions on giving trends. So with that being said, join me in welcoming today's speakers, and I'm going to pass it over to Asha.
Great. Do I need that? You're good. Am I on? Can anybody hear me? Yes? Okay. Sorry, I was told to shout, so I will try to do that. Thank you, Elizabeth, and to everybody at Classy for having us and having this panel. And you guys are such amazing, collaborative, creative Giving Tuesday partners. It's lovely to be here. I'm glad I'm here today rather than yesterday. I heard some tales about the heat. So I want to spend less time talking on this panel and more time listening to the incredible practitioners who are actually making Giving Tuesday work in such amazing ways. And it's really such a delight and an honor for me to be on the panel today with these particular women because in different ways they are just the standard setters and trailblazers when it comes to Giving Tuesday implementation, execution, vision, imagination, collaboration, the whole 9 yards. So we're going to get to them soon. I just want to start out, one of the cool things about Giving Tuesday, not even the cool things, one of the most important things that makes Giving Tuesday is that it's an idea that is meant to be co-opted. It's meant to be corrupted. And you wouldn't usually say that about a brand, right? We're usually very protective of brand. With Giving Tuesday, we deliberately unbranded the concept of it, and we did that so that, while we were taking a risk, right? We were taking a risk with creating a new movement. We also did it so that other people could own it. And they really do, right? We say we know it's a movement because it's moving by itself. The community is what moves it. The flip side of that is that people tend to see Giving Tuesday through their own lens. It becomes what it means to them, what it has been for them. So I just want to sort of set a little bit of context from the really privileged position that I sit in, which is that I'm able to have a kind of macro view as Giving Tuesday becomes all of these other things. Not that we're making it, but that it is organically becoming a sort of global innovation lab and feedback loop. That there are some things that people are generally not even aware of that Giving Tuesday is or is doing. So I'm just going to set a tiny bit of that context, then we'll get into the actual great stories. So Giving Tuesday, is everybody familiar with Giving Tuesday? Is anybody brand new to the idea? Raise your hand if you're brand new to the idea. Wow, literally only this guy. That is amazing. All right, well, I hope you're going to be a convert at the end of the session. So Giving Tuesday, Day of Giving following Black Friday and Cyber Monday, an idea meant to be adapted by organizations, by corporations, by houses of worship, educational institutions, individuals, a day that is meant to encourage giving in whatever form feels meaningful to whoever is doing the giving, whoever is soliciting the gift. That's the basic idea, really pretty simple. One thing that relatively few people know about Giving Tuesday, and again, that's by design, it's not something we mind, is that it was created at the 92nd Street Y. Has anybody heard of the 92nd Street Y? Okay, well that's not bad. So we're a 143-year-old educational and cultural and community center on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. The reason that I like to talk about the fact that Giving Tuesday was created at the Y is that we don't give old institutions a whole lot of credit for social movements or great innovations. Great innovations in the nonprofit sector. We would really, more likely think of that as coming from an incubator or a startup. And yet we shouldn't, right? Startups should not have all the reputation of being agile and innovative and risk tolerant. So I think we're really proud of that, and it fits very, very much into our mission as well. I often get the question, why in the world would a cultural center like the Y start a movement like Giving Tuesday? Because giving is in our mission statement, right? So it's actually a very clear mission alignment. Another thing that kind of is not as public about Giving Tuesday as I would love it to be is the amount of community engagement that there is in the movement. So this year we'll have over 100 cities, towns, and states across the country that have their own local Giving Tuesday campaigns. That means local businesses, local churches, local government, and local nonprofits all rally to put on a community day that can look like $9 million raised for all of Illinois or Maryland, or $70,000 raised for a tiny town in Kansas. And this particular one is in Bethel, Alaska. This is a tiny little, it's not even really a town, it's a 4-way stop that is an administrative hub for a set of native Alaskan villages. And they did a Giving Tuesday campaign last year, which was these people, these volunteers going out and standing on the street corner in negative 20-degree weather, collecting money for the local area nonprofits that have names like the Alaskan Women's Tundra Coalition and stuff like that. Like, I love that Giving Tuesday is raising money for those types of nonprofits all the way across the country. This is Booth Bay, Maine. Again, bringing together these communities. That kind of grassroots engagement is just amazing to see. The same thing is actually happening around the world. So everywhere from Ethiopia and Tanzania. This picture doesn't look like much, but this is actually in Siberia. And our Russian Giving Tuesday leader sent me this picture via WhatsApp one day and said, she just traveled to Siberia for a Giving Tuesday meetup and had a room full of people and asked them how many of them had heard of Giving Tuesday before, and more than half the room held up their hands. Now, to me, that says something amazing about technology, right? And the borderlessness of ideas like this, that this idea has now, in its 5th year, traveled all the way to Siberia. And these are places around the world, right? Croatia, Slovenia, a lot of Western European countries, and the UK and Spain, but also a lot of countries that are brand new democracies or whose economies are really, really struggling. And for us in the nonprofit sector, like we work really, really hard, right? And we have a lot of challenges, but it's such a good reminder to me that it's almost incomparable to what the nonprofit sector in these parts of the world are facing. And yet they complain about the same things that we hear: lack of collaboration, a sort of siloed problem, lack of innovation, et cetera. So these are some of the ways that countries around the world have adapted the Giving Tuesday heart logo to reflect their own flags and their own communities. This is one of the newest countries we signed up, Panama, which designed its logo to reflect the Panama Canal. So that's just a tiny bit of the context of Giving Tuesday, of what we're looking at it becoming, and it's so amazing. Now, again, like, just to bring it down to an organizational level, it wouldn't work if there weren't organizations doing incredible things with it. And how are they doing that? How are they making it work? And how do they deal with the sort of tension between Giving Tuesday being a license to innovate, right, and the pressure to innovate? So that's what we're going to talk about here today. And I just want to set it up first by saying I always encourage Giving Tuesday campaigns to feel free to steal from other Giving Tuesday campaigns. Like, it's not like everybody has to reinvent the wheel. And so I think that's the spirit we're all in here today. We want these guys to tell us what they did and how it worked, and then, like, take it, and feel free to replicate. So let's hear from you about the amazing Trevor Project.
So for those of you who don't know what the Trevor Project is, because the name, I don't have any slides.
Oh, that's right.
I have no slides, so I'm just passing that down. The name, the Trevor Project, doesn't necessarily tell you what it is we do. We're the nation's leading and only national nonprofit organization that's accredited by the American Association of Suicidology, focused on crisis intervention and suicide prevention for LGBTQ youth under the age of 25. For those of you who don't know what LGBTQ is, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and or questioning young folks. So what has happened in this last 6 to 8 months in our community? We'll go back a year because we just celebrated or remembered the 1-year anniversary of the Pulse nightclub massacre. So the Trevor Project was founded 20 years ago based on an Academy Award winning short film called Trevor that had suicide ideation in it and coming out themes. The founders of that film, when it was going to be played on HBO, recognized the fact that there were going to be many children who were going to be calling because they had outreach from the LGBTQ community after the Academy Awards. So they enlisted Ellen DeGeneres to do an intro for the film on HBO with a hotline phone number. Within 24 hours of that film being played on HBO, more than 3,500 calls were received from youth across the country. So fast forward now 20 years, there's the Pulse massacre. The number of crisis contacts to our Lifeline text and chat markedly increased. We saw double to triple the amount of crisis contacts within a 24-hour period than we normally receive. Fast forward a little bit further to the November elections, and we saw the largest number ever in the history of the organization. Within 24 hours, it was 4 times as high as the outreach after the Pulse massacre. So we're looking at November, we're looking right in the heart of Giving Tuesday campaigning for that particular time period. At the Trevor Project, what we did, our strategy at the beginning of that, before the election, was momentum building and multi-channel engagements. What happened because of the election results, and as we were seeing an administration and knowing that there was an administration that had a vice president who supported conversion therapy for LGBTQ kids and other people who were coming into that cabinet, we knew that there was going to be an issue on our lines, so we prepared. The day of the election, all of our lines were full, text, chat, Lifeline, rolling over. Every staff member, hundreds of volunteers came in line in order to collect those calls. So we had a story as we moved in to Giving Tuesday. And that story was, kids are in crisis. We don't have enough volunteers. We don't have enough Lifeline counselors. We don't have enough ways to answer those calls as quickly as they're coming in. So we started to tell that story on Giving Tuesday. And so what we did is we reconnected with past supporters in targeted states like Florida, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. You sort of see what's happening as we followed that. We got them engaged. We got our major donors engaged and gave them information all the way through the month of November as we're leading up to Giving Tuesday. So we primed our supporter base by giving them Giving Tuesday messaging on all channels. So we started that via social, via e-newsletter. We made personal telephone calls to our major donors and had them engage their giving circle in preparation of Giving Tuesday. Using the Classy platform, we had a dedicated Giving Tuesday fundraising page. On our own website, we had a featured scroll on our homepage that was talking about Giving Tuesday and really targeting people to give on that particular day.
Can I just ask you a quick question?
Yes.
So you said you did it on all those channels. Was one a standout success?
Our social media channel is, we have almost 1 million followers on our social channels. Most of them are kids. So they don't have the ability to give in large numbers, but they do have the ability to give $1 or $5. So we did see those donations coming in from parents who were giving on behalf of their kids or in memory of their kids who may have died from suicide in the past. So we did see that. We also, we have what's called the Trevor Magic, where my job as a marketer is to try and engage people that we wouldn't normally engage to help us build those funds. So we also had some of this magic with John Oliver saying right after the election, oh my God, this just happened in this country. You need to support nonprofit organizations like the Trevor Project. We didn't ask him to do that. He knew about us. He knew about the work of the Trevor Project and how it was literally, very literally, saving young LGBTQ lives every day. From that, we saw an explosion of donations. And we have other people who just do that for us. And that speaks to people understanding what your mission is. So if you're very clear about what your mission is, you're telling the stories, you have a kid in crisis who calls a crisis line, who has a plan, the means, and a very quick timeline to perhaps killing themselves. And they get a highly trained counselor on the other end of that line that either takes them off that bridge, has them put their gun down, has them put the pill bottle away. Whatever it is, you de-escalate those people from literally killing themselves within moments or hours, and you're able to stop that from happening. That's a really powerful story to tell, and I believe that there is no one who, when you say, hey, do you want to help me stop young LGBTQ kids from killing themselves? I don't think there's anybody in this room or anybody who's watching right now who would say no. So be sure to get your mission very clear. Tell your stories, collect your stories. If you work with young people and they're willing to tell their story about the positivity that's come from the programs and services of your organization, collect those stories and start telling them. I'll stop for now. We have more to talk about, and I'll let it go on.
Okay, we'll come back to you though. There's lots of questions.
Great, so I'll give an introduction on Camp Kesem, if I can figure this out. Perfect. How many people here have heard of Camp Kesem before? Oh, good, there's a few of you. So we are a national organization that supports children impacted by their parents' cancer. And the primary way in which we do that is we provide free summer camps. The way in which we do it is unique in that we have college chapters throughout the country. Currently we have 86 and we're growing to 105 college chapters in 40 states across the nation, where all of our college students are volunteers and they work throughout the year to put together the programming for camp, but also to fundraise for their chapters. So we put about 70% of their chapter budgets is in the hands of our student leaders. This year we're going to serve 7,200 children, and we have a little army of 3,500 college students across the country fundraising and being advocates for children impacted by a parent's cancer. We also have, because they're college students, they graduate every year, so we estimate that we have about 6,000 engaged alumni across the country that we have at our ready, which we used for Giving Tuesday. So our story for Giving Tuesday is very different from the Trevor Project in that we did not have a unified message purposefully. Because we have over 80 chapters and this coming year over 100 chapters, it's just impossible for us to really unify one imagery, one message, and that's not really where our assets lie. Our assets lie with our student leaders. Them telling their stories and engaging their networks in a way that they feel comfortable is what we capitalized on. To give a history of Giving Tuesday for Camp Kesem, you can see that we didn't start out too strong. So if you're thinking about joining the Giving Tuesday movement this year, don't be afraid. The first 2 years really, we looked at Giving Tuesday more of a marketing opportunity for us. Because of where Giving Tuesday falls in our school year, it's very early. And most of our fundraising was happening in the spring because that's when students were engaged and were able to fundraise. It happened later in the year. So we were looking for a way to engage students earlier, but it didn't feel like fundraising was the right way to engage them. So the first 2 years we just said, just have activations on your campuses. Have a photo booth, have a bake sale, have something that gets the word out on campus about Camp Kesem. And if students want to give or want to donate, great. As you can see, monetarily, that didn't give us much. Even though we had a pretty substantial network even in 2013 and 2014, it didn't amount to dollars in the end. And so we shifted our messaging in 2015 and 2016 with our student leaders to make it more about fundraising and donating. The second shift we did was to take it away from the campuses and focusing on campus life. Obviously, students don't necessarily have that much funds to give. So focusing on the broader network, the community of their colleges, their friends and family, those that they could reach out to on a bigger level. So between 2014 and 2015, you can see the shift of a marketing campaign to a fundraising campaign. We started to provide fundraising campaign tools and templates for them to use, which I can talk about a little bit more later. We started to really capitalize on social media. And another change, to give Classy a plug, is that we shifted to Classy. We started using the Classy platform in 2015. So we used their peer-to-peer network starting in 2015, which you can see definitely improved our numbers significantly. As far as our shift from 2015 to 2016, I would say the biggest change between those 2 years was just us getting out of our own way and not trying to do so much of a unified message. In 2015, we really came out strong, trying to make everybody do the same thing. Whether you were in California or Arkansas, you had the same message, the same imagery, the same cover photo on your Facebook page. And while we still provide those tools, it's not required. It's not us coming from the top telling people how to fundraise. This year we stepped back, we gave people the tools that they needed, but really let them kind of share the magic in their own way. And as you can see, we over doubled what we were able to raise on Giving Tuesday.
That is really, really remarkable. I mean, the way that you activated a whole country's worth of college students are they networked with each other?
They are, yes, and you can see between the couple of years we've gotten better at that, of allowing them to connect with each other and share really great ideas. Something we did in 2016 was we used a lot of competition, for lack of a better term, friendly competition within our network. So we set up for each of our chapters, and then we also had it on the fundraiser side, on the individual fundraiser side, where they could buy into goal groups and say, I'm going to raise $1,000, I'm going to raise $5,000, and they committed to that. And then we connected them with other people with the same goal. So they weren't trying to compete with somebody that's trying to raise $15,000. They were competing with people that were in their same sphere. But that way they were able to share good ideas, and also the day of, just reach out. We provided tools through Google Apps and through Facebook, groups that were private, but that they could share what they were doing and what they found really effective. So they are very connected, yes.
So if you were to give people like a kind of your main takeaway from this incredible trajectory of growth, would it be, don't worry if you're starting small? Would it be try to give up more ownership and let people do their own thing? What would it be?
Yeah, I would say let people do their own thing is the biggest thing we've learned. And it's kind of funny because Kesem is all about letting our children be their true authentic selves, and we talk about at camp, we take on camp names so that they let go of all of the stresses of their real lives and take on this camp persona that is their fun best selves, and it wasn't something we were doing in fundraising. And fundraising can be fun, especially around the holidays, and with something like Giving Tuesday, you can make it whatever you want it to be. And our mission is pretty niche. Kids affected by a parent's cancer isn't something that everybody can relate to, but pretty much everybody can relate to cancer, period. And everybody wants to support children. And depending on how our college student leaders or alumni got engaged, they each had their own story to tell. And sometimes it was as simple as, I wanted to give back. I wanted to be a volunteer. I wanted to be philanthropic. And that can be enough. So if they share their story with their friends and family, those people want to support them on a personal level, not necessarily supporting the mission. And by us giving that, accepting that, and allowing them to take our message and run with it, we could see in the numbers that it was effective.
Amazing, really amazing. All right, I'm just going to set you up a little bit, Sydney, just because, so Sydney's a little bit different with her story than these other guys. So one of the interesting things that happened with Giving Tuesday that was a surprise to us was that we started getting kind of inadvertently into the philanthropic data game. And we certainly didn't mean to do that, and I have no background in that area. And what was happening over the first 5 years of Giving Tuesday was that massive questions were being raised about the role of Giving Tuesday in overall giving, the way Giving Tuesday works with end-of-year appeals, the role of social media in converting donations, and whether Giving Tuesday was kind of subverting conventional wisdom in that area, and like 1.5 million other questions that we weren't able to answer. What we were asked over and over was, how much money is it raising? And to try to count that number, we started to form relationships with giving processes and platforms like Classy, and there are dozens and dozens of them, which was a total surprise to me in beginning to do this work. And in working with them to try to get an aggregate number. But then once you have even a semi-aggregate number, you start realizing how data in our sector is so problematic and so fractured. And often when it exists, it's not actually being turned into anything useful and actionable for us all to use to do a better job, to build our organizational capacity, to raise more money, to better communicate with our donors and potential donors. And so thus the partnership with Datakind was born. Datakind is an incredibly unique organization, and we are, I think, just one step into a really, really interesting collaboration with them. So Sydney, take it away.
Thank you, Asha. Yeah, you said everything that I wanted to say, so I think I'm done. So Datakind is a nonprofit that you see our tagline there. We harness the power of data science in the service of humanity. So what that means is that we undertake projects that use machine learning and predictive analytics to either optimize the services that nonprofits are already delivering, so making nonprofits able to do the work that they're already doing faster, better, stronger, or to solve challenges that nonprofits have that they didn't know was possible to solve with data. For example, we worked with a water district in California to develop a tool to predict how much water consumption a region would be using, so that we could basically predict how much water storage that region would need to spend over the course of the next year, saving that region millions of dollars in water storage costs. We've used satellite imagery to identify certain crops in Ethiopia to predict the spread of crop disease for small shareholder farmers in Ethiopia. So we're using data in really innovative ways. And we do our work in, we have 3 main engagement types. So we have our short-term, mid-term, and long-term projects. And our long-term projects are called labs. And we work with multi-stakeholders over the course of a year. And we focus on one issue area. And we basically aggregate multiple data sets to solve one specific problem. We also have our midterm engagements, which are called data core projects, and we'll work with one nonprofit partner to identify the pain points that that organization faces, and we will get a team of volunteer data scientists to solve that main pain point that the organization faces. And then we have our short-term engagements, which are called data dives, and that's really why I'm here with you today, because in March of last year, this year, we partnered with the 92Y and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to undertake a data dive on Giving Tuesday data. So this is a little bit about the data science journey. So part of the fun and excitement of a data science project is that often what an organization may think is their problem is not truly their problem. So the scoping of the project actually takes months. We'll have some time spent sort of gathering the data, asking questions that we think we want to answer, and then realizing that we're not addressing the true problem, and then we'll go back to the drawing board. The project execution phase is actually an iterative process that will work with a team of data scientists who are at the top of their field, and it can take anywhere from days to months. With regards to a data dive, it'll happen over the course of a weekend. And then in a post-project, we will package the results and give them to our nonprofit partners so that they can capitalize on the work that is done. So let me take a step back and talk about the way that we did our work with the 92nd Street Y. So in a data dive, Datakind worked with the 92nd Street Y and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to identify 4 project topics based on Giving Tuesday data, so that we took a holistic perspective on philanthropic giving. And we scoped with the 92nd Street Y for months in advance to try to identify concrete project objectives so that a team of 150 data scientists could come for 48 hours to deliver insights. And then hopefully we will move this forward to a predictive model. And I'll be able to share some of the preliminary results with you, but the main finding that we can take away is that giving Tuesday produce a net lift to the nonprofit sector. In other words, it's not shifting giving from one time of year to another, but it's actually increasing giving overall, that we're getting new donors that are coming in on this day. And that's something that the nonprofit community feels, but to be able to substantiate that with data is really quite powerful. And I also just want to share a couple of photos from the event. This is a picture of data scientists having a wild Saturday. It doesn't quite look like it from the picture, but data dives are actually really high energy events. You get data scientists who are really at the top of their game, who really just want to give back to their community. And strengthening the nonprofit sector as a whole is an ambitious mission, and they were thrilled to be able to undertake that in partnership with the 92nd Street Y and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So here are some other more smiley photos. But it's truly, an inspiring weekend to come together and do work on these projects.
I mean, there's also the aspect that these data scientists are they're not all nonprofit data scientists. They're like from Twitter and Blue Apron and ZocDoc, and like they were all these startups. So that, to me, that was also so magical because it was enfranchising all of these new people, many for-profit people, in the social impact world. Obviously, they're already willing to volunteer their time, but really getting them familiar with Giving Tuesday as well. The thing that is so cool about a data dive too is, unlike hiring a data science firm and saying like, look at this transactional data and tell me a gender breakdown, an age breakdown by donor, etc. Not that that's not interesting. This is almost like a dive into like the abyss and not knowing what you're going to come up with, right? That these data scientists are looking at these massive data sets, and what they're going to find is kind of anyone's guess. It's really, really absolutely amazing. That report, by the way, will be out and will be public, and the whole reason we did this was to turn some of these massive data sets into tools that all of us can use. So Cindy, I'm going to come back to you in a second.
Yeah.
And also, everybody, feel free to raise your hands if you have questions. We don't have too much longer, so I really want to get any questions from this audience that we might have. I do want to just touch on really briefly the whole issue of, so Giving Tuesday for me has always had this very celebratory energy to it that is very counter to some. We were talking about this in the speaker's lounge, that some fundraising can feel like really emotionally heavy, right? Really sort of guilt-inducing. And I always wonder about that kind of fundraising, if it's kind of prodding some initial giving, but not retaining someone as a lifetime donor, because the giving is then associated with such negative emotions. And what I see with Giving Tuesday is that often the storytelling that organizations will do or organizational collaborations will do around it is actually very joyful, even if the issues themselves are very negative and very heavy. This last year was different, right? Because it was the second Big Tuesday in November. And people were feeling feelings about things. And that was translating into the way that they were giving on Giving Tuesday. I think probably for you more than anyone else on this panel. So I just really briefly, would you talk about like where do you go from there? Like, is it going to have that sort of reactive feeling going forward? Do you see a sustainability in your upward trajectory in future years when hopefully things are they not going to be as, when they still might be as fraught? I don't know.
They may be. It depends on what happens in 3 years or less in the next election. Yeah. So one of the things that we talked about was that engagement of people and planning and storytelling. But here's the thing. What we did is we built. Suicide is a pretty serious topic, and it's difficult to be happy fundraisers around suicide and crisis intervention. So what we were able to do a little bit on the data side as well is we were able to dig deep and find out, what does $1 mean for the Trevor Project? And so we had a very aggressive fundraising goal on Giving Tuesday of $50,000. That's what we wanted to be able to raise. So we started our thinking about our campaign around $50,000 and what does that do? So not only did we have Trevor Tuesdays leading up to Giving Tuesday itself that had information or quotes and a photo from people who had been positively affected by Trevor. But we started talking about $1 equals 1 more minute of crisis counseling on our lines. So we were literally able to connect this explosion of crisis contacts around the election to these kids who were not getting immediate help because we were trying to keep up with all of these calls. So $50,000 fundraising goal. How many minutes of crisis counseling? An average call is about 25 minutes. If it's a high crisis call, it could go on for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. How many minutes are you willing to donate in order to alleviate crisis amongst LGBTQ kids? And so we were able to personalize it. I will give you 100 minutes. I will give you 500 minutes. At the Trevor Project, we have what we call a dual crisis intervention program, where we have research, advocacy, and education that hopefully stops whatever is happening to cause the crisis in the first place. And then if people get through that wall that we've placed, then we have text, chat, and lifeline where people will get immediate help. So we didn't concentrate on the research, education, and advocacy piece of it. We really concentrated on this country has fallen into crisis. People are overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. Where can they put their energy? How can I help? We saw it come with the women's marches. We just saw it this past weekend with the resist marches and the LGBTQ community across the country, where hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people were coming out into the streets. So we capitalized on that. $1 equals 1 more minute of crisis counseling. Help us help these LGBTQ kids. Now, to get back to your question, how do we cultivate people into longer giving? We saw new donors rise by 1,000% in giving. So people were activated by an acute cause. How do we get them to continue through, right? If this administration is not, or other things in the world are not actively attacking an LGBTQ community, for example, like the AIDS and HIV crisis, when there were red ribbons, when people were dying at alarming rates, that was crisis and people wanted to help and give. Then we had 8 years of a very friendly administration where our community was still under attack from outside forces, but not from the federal government. So we had these 8 years of sort of a relaxed environment in the LGBTQ community that immediately switched back to crisis and emergency. So we have to respond quickly, and you have to be aware of that. And having your data points available, how does your donation help us immediately? Connect the dollar to the program or the service, and that's what we saw encourage people to give in huge numbers. I said that our goal was $50,000. We raised more than $100,000 on Giving Tuesday.
Amazing, and congratulations.
Thank you.
So, yes, it is hard for suicide to be celebratory, but it's not hard for a campaign to be solutions oriented. And I do think that that's the tactic you got so right.
Absolutely, can you hear me? Because saving lives is celebratory.
Yes.
Right?
Right,
Stopping.
and knowing that what I give is connected to a certain number of minutes, right, or to a very specific impact, it is very different than like, here's a wide-eyed kitten that's being tortured, and if you don't call this 1-800 number, you're a bad person.
Right, you are literally partnering with the Trevor Project to save a young life.
Right.
You're doing it, our counselors are doing it. Together we're partners. Thank you for supporting that. And we did that as well. In our e-newsletters, we updated people every day. This is where we're at. This is where we're going. We need more money. We're almost there. We're almost at our fundraising goal. And then you do that little tricky thing, right? You know, we're almost at our fundraising goal, but we've blown past it, and we're like, who else is going to want to give to support this? And it was an amazing campaign.
All right, let me just, yes. Aww.
So
There we go. I can speak a little bit to that. I agree. We're a very unique organization that has a really huge asset with our college students in that they are required to fundraise. Oh, sure. Sorry. So she asked basically, essentially, if you don't have a network of college students at the ready, what do you do? How can you apply the same kind of tools and tactics to a nonprofit that doesn't have those kinds of resources? And so speaking from the place of having those, just because you have it doesn't mean you know how to utilize it or utilize it well. And we made a lot of mistakes in that process. So even though our students were required to fundraise, the way in which we went about it didn't necessarily motivate and engage them from day one. So we had a lot of lessons learned of, and there's probably other assets that other nonprofits have that you don't realize that you can engage. Something we tried this year outside of our student network was with our staff and our alumni and our boards. Because our alumni are adults. They're not required to fundraise. We would love for them to fundraise, but they don't need to. And they're young adults, so they don't necessarily have the capacity to give that other older adults might have. So what we did this year was we got creative and we kind of used the same model that we use with our chapters and our students with our staff and our boards. And we set up the same kind of competition where we had a staff team and an alumni team and they were competing for silly prizes. But the day of it gives you that same kind of feel of community that we're all working towards the same goal. And in our case, we did emphasize fundraising, but for the 6,000 alumni that we do have in our network, we didn't ask all of them to become fundraisers, we asked them to give. And it helped that they could give to something they were already connected to in college, that there was their alma mater and they wanted to give to their chapter, but in some cases, if you're 8, 9, 10 years out of college, you're not still connected with that chapter. So we did need to engage them directly on Giving Tuesday, and that is something that as a national organization, we did have a separate Giving Tuesday directives directly to them. That was a unified campaign that probably looked more like what a typical nonprofits might look like, but as part of that we still included that kind of competition and fundraising element to it that I think can apply to any volunteers you might have, your board members, your staff members, any individual that says, hey, how can I help? Even if it's $100 on Giving Tuesday, if you get a lot of people to want to give or to fundraise, do a little mini give-get on the day of, it goes a long way. So for us, it was success in numbers, but I think it's something that can be replicated on a smaller scale as well.
I'll answer that question too, just from a perspective of having worked with so many different organizations at this point. Some of the earliest just anecdotal information that came back to us from nonprofits of all sizes was that even if they did something really small on Giving Tuesday as a first step, like a week of email buildup and some social activity, that they did significantly better not only on Giving Tuesday but all the way through their end of year campaign. So to think, yet there were sort of organizations right from the beginning, like one of the very first organizations that signed up for the movement when our goal was to sign up 100 nonprofits to do this the first year, was an organization called Dress for Success, which turned Giving Tuesday into Giving Shoes Day, and still does that and does a whole campaign around raising shoes on Giving Tuesday, Giving Shoes Day. And we see that all over the place, by the way, like the University of Michigan's Giving Tuesday is Giving Blue Day. I mean, there's every possible rhyme you could think of. So there's those types of like super innovative campaigns, right? Then there's the a board member will do a 2X match on Giving Tuesday, and that's okay. Like not everything has to hit the highest bar, and you tend to see trajectories like Kesem's, where the numbers are 4 figures or 5 figures, and then they grow and they grow and they grow over the course of the year. So not everything is a magic bullet right from the beginning, but you can think of this as a really easy barrier to entry.
Does it work? Yay, it works. I have a question for Kristen and Sydney, and it's kind of a two-parter. So, Kristen, for you, what does that toolkit look like? What did you put in there that just really turned down to some magic sauce? And then the Sydney part is, what did you learn from that? What do you wish that you knew in 2014 that you know today? What do you wish that you knew in 2016 that you know today? That we can mobilize really in any community?
Great questions.
In terms of the tools and the toolkits that we provide, it's almost everything that you can possibly think of, and we've built it throughout the years. The biggest thing for our fundraisers are simple things like email templates and Facebook posts, cover photos, graphics and things that they can easily plug in and use that are completely generic. So for us, we use just the Giving Tuesday hashtag and hashtag Give Kids Kesem. Nothing else in our branding. We don't include anything else in our branding that's required. In terms of tools, we give a lot of, to our college students in general and to our alumni, how to fundraise, tips and tools. A lot of people, especially on Giving Tuesday, they want to do something, but it might be their first time asking for money. So what's step one? How do you even do that? And how do you tell your story? So, and I think Cindy can speak to the storytelling aspect of it. What is a compelling story? Why did you get engaged? How did you get involved? And really coaching them through that process of what does this mean for you? Not what does it mean to the organization, but personalizing it in that way. In terms of what I wish we knew, and even now we're still learning, what we realized this past year that we did really well was we set up these groups to compete against each other, but we didn't necessarily incentivize and motivate individuals as well as we could. So now we're going back to the people that did really well and fundraised really well on the day up to say, how did you do it? What were the things that really worked for you and didn't work for you, and what more could we have provided? And like I mentioned, we provide it in Google. So we have Google Apps that we share. So there's Google Documents that honestly are probably public. You could probably find them, that we share with everybody. So anybody that wants to see, like I said, from a Facebook post to, I think we have a 12-page document outlining from day one, 2 months out, what are the things that you should be doing step by step. And then as a national organization too, we bug people, we remind people a lot. So even though they have the tools and the templates, we're reminding them, it's 2 months to Giving Tuesday, what have you done? It's a month to Giving Tuesday, what have you done? It's 2 weeks to Giving Tuesday, what have you done? Especially because we're working with a group that travels for Thanksgiving, might be in finals during Giving Tuesday. It's not a time of year that people are accessible, and that's not just college students, that's all of us as staff. We might be on vacation. So we use things like Hootsuite and Boomerang for Gmail to make sure that things are being sent when they need to be sent, even if we're doing it 2 or 3 weeks in advance. And those are tools that we share with our fundraisers as well. If you might not be available the day of Giving Tuesday, but you can set up your emails to send 10 emails to your closest friends on Giving Tuesday, and let them know, what's going to be happening. And the same thing, like I said, a couple weeks in advance or a month in advance, send them a note to say that we're going to be bugging you.
Sid, do you want to touch on the storytelling piece?
Yeah, absolutely. That really sort of echoes all the advice that I would give. And just to elaborate on the storytelling piece, sort of to validate it with data, one of the projects that some of our volunteers worked on was we had data from My Giving Story, which is a competition that Melinda Gates started, where they had participants submit entries basically telling a story about what motivated them to give. And then they had their networks or the social networks vote on which entry was the best for a prize. And then we had our data science volunteers, and maybe that's why they were looking so happy in that picture before. They had them manually sort of track the story arc and rate the emotions that they were feeling along the story arc, so that then we could cluster each story into these various trajectories. And then we were able to provide 8 clusters and rate them by most effective and least effective by number of engagements that they received in this competition. And so if we have any English majors out there, the most effective story arc is the Shakespearean story arc. So basically what you should be doing is telling a story to your constituents, something that has a little bit of drama, but ultimately ends on a positive note. So the Trevor Project is doing it absolutely right. Basically, sort of saying why you're there is an issue that you're solving for, but ending on a high note, what you can do, the solutions, strength-based focus. And so, there's the data validation of what everyone's doing right in terms of storytelling. And then one other piece that I'll mention that was really exciting that we were able to find from some of the data is that another project that we did 30 different payment processors gave us data from Giving Tuesday, and we were able to aggregate and anonymize that data to give to a team of volunteers. And I want to thank Classy for being one of those providers, so seeing the value in strengthening the sector by giving us access to their data. And from that data, it was over 10 years, so we were able to see both before 2012 and after 2012. We were able to see transactional level data. So we were able to see spikes in data, and we saw that there was a spike in Giving Tuesday that was similar to spikes that we saw around natural disasters. So basically what you're seeing is that around natural disasters, there are social media campaigns, there's a crisis, and then a call to action, and then you have Giving Tuesday, which is basically a call to action, but for the whole sector. And so it's really powerful. It's saying that you can empower your constituents to reach out to their social networks and call people to give, and then provide a new source of income for the nonprofits that you care about, and it's truly powerful.
I hope I'm allowed to mention this. Another thing I loved about the My Giving Story data was that people who used logos, right, nonprofit logos, they were negatively correlated with positive reactions. Isn't that amazing? Now, just because you mentioned feeling validated, from a Giving Tuesday perspective, because of our whole unbranding risk, I felt really validated by that. And that babies and puppies are positively correlated, even if the story has nothing to do with babies or puppies.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. And since you specifically asked for advice, also in addition to sort of strategic storytelling, when you include photos and videos that are really correlated with your mission, we see an increase in engagement, and we hope that then has an increase in giving.
I'm mindful of time, so are there any last couple questions?
We have about 5 minutes left, so, okay.
Mine is really quick. What would you say is sort of like the most important thing to do offline that sort of fuels the online stuff? I know some of us can tend to like hide behind our computers, but so yeah.
It's a great question.
Plan in advance. You can't start in like November 15th in getting your stuff done. You have to start now in what your planning is and create your collateral. Make sure that you're talking to your major donors, engaging them as fundraising captains for you. It's sort of the here's you and tell 10 friends and please fundraise this amount of money, and giving them their own fundraising goal within your Giving Tuesday campaign. I can't tell you enough. If you don't want to be successful, start in November. If you do want to be successful, start when you get back home.
Number 3. I would just add to that, we use, similarly, same thing, planning in advance. We also engage with corporate partners or other people outside of our network that might be able to do things in their workplaces, or we still have campus activations like photo booths that get the word out beyond the fundraising dollars. And those are things similarly, I mean, we're doing it right now, so we're doing it 6 months in advance to a year in advance, trying to get those partners lined up so that they're willing to also share our message the day of. And they might be giving financially, they might be giving a matching gift, which is a great way to spark and incentivize donations, or they might just be doing things on kind of like the donating of shoes or something, donating something in kind, or doing things just to get our message out.
I'll also add to that one thing that we get non-stop requests for around Giving Tuesday are things that journalists can film. So if there's ever anything like an actual event or an activation offline that we can direct people to, those things tend to get more media attention, and then that's better for the fundraising and better for the organization. So there's like a group Holla Bake, right, at a JCC, or there's a Camp Kesem activation. Like those things are really, really powerful and worth putting together if possible.
I'd also suggest that you take a look at the report that Datakind, 92i, and Bill and Melinda Gates will be publishing. It'll be available after June. I think that would be a good first step.
Yeah, definitely.
Hi, thank you for this panel. It was really helpful. So my question is something you touched on earlier about the year-end giving. So we did our first campaign for Giving Tuesday last year, and we noticed that it I think Giving Tuesday happened a week before we kicked off our year end. So I was wondering, like, especially with the data that you've looked over, would you recommend combining the two campaigns or keeping them separate?
So I actually wouldn't recommend either, because I've seen organizations have great success with either one of those things. I was just talking to a woman last week in Baltimore who runs an amazing organization called Thread, who does an incredible Giving Tuesday activation that lasts all year. It involves small dinners of people getting together in diverse groups, people who don't know each other, and then fanning out through Baltimore on Giving Tuesday, performing like 20 different acts of kindness and charity, et cetera. It's phenomenal. And she was saying they just gave up their entire year-end appeal and just did Giving Tuesday instead. Then we see tons of other organizations who use Giving Tuesday as a kickoff to the next few weeks, ending on December 31st. It's actually, if you want to do that, it's really useful as a way to sort of draw back December 31st, sort of like, oh, I'm writing my check, kind of unmindful, unintentional giving that people are doing because they know that that's what they have to do on December 31st, and actually turning it into a very mindful and very intentional activity, and then the momentum can kind of continue from there. But any specifics from you guys?
Yeah, we actually utilized the success of the Giving Tuesday campaign to draw us through the rest of the year by being able to go back to it and saying, because of your donations, we were able to add another volunteer training. We were able to expand our text and chat lines by an hour or two each day. And we've continued that through today. Our crisis text and chat this month expanded to 7 days a week. Because of Giving Tuesday, we were able to afford to expand that. Now we need to be able to move it to 24/7, 365 to match our Lifeline hours. So we're going to continue that same campaign all the way through this Giving Tuesday with the goal of being 24/7, 365 by this time next year.
Don't have a microphone. There we go. We kicked it off. We kicked off our year-end appeal with Giving Tuesday. For us, they're completely different audiences. Our year-end appeal tended to be a mailed appeal to a different demographic than those that we were reaching with our social media. But we also felt like if they happened to see the ask on Giving Tuesday and then also get our letter in the mail 2 weeks later, that's totally fine. And the success of Giving Tuesday compelled them to give just as well. They were just as excited to be a part of that movement. We did integrate our messaging a little bit better to acknowledge that there was Giving Tuesday and that it did happen. Because the first year we definitely had that miss of, didn't you just ask? Or are you on the same page? Or these completely different departments doing completely different things? So we did integrate the messaging, but for us it was completely different audiences. And one was primarily an online social media fundraising campaign, and our year-end appeal is primarily a mailed letter campaign.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up because we're out of time, but that was super powerful too, to be just reminded of that the work we all do saves lives and the planet and animals and all of those good things, and it's just more crucial now than ever. I would also just end by saying, Giving Tuesday last year raised $180 million plus just online, just in 24 hours, and that's a lot of money, right? But if you compare it to Cyber Monday, where billions and billions of dollars are spent, we are still way underperforming in our sector in terms of the money that is still out there on the table. And so I think recognizing that our line of work is really the bedrock of civil society, and we should aim really high in terms of what we can raise and what we can achieve together. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.